And how do you assess, because we're talking about these Gulf countries which have ties with India, and of course they are major, for example, Saudi Arabia is of course the finance hub when we talk about it and it evolving. How do you address, or how would you assess these Gulf states' action? Because as of now they're being attacked, and they've also condemned about it, they've condemned the attacks. But when we look at, because they're allies with the U.S., so how do you assess their action going forward?
You see, this is something that Iran has done will have a dual impact. It is thinking that it is targeting the U.S. bases or the Israeli assets in the region. But they are violating the sovereignty of all the countries in the region, basically. And therefore, none of the countries, any respectful country, will allow that kind of a thing to happen. In the beginning, most of the Gulf countries had very clearly told President Trump that they will not even allow their airspace. They have been trying to dissuade him from doing it, but he did not listen to that. So now the situation has come. So naturally they will have to defend themselves. And we will see a balance of power changing in the region. You will see most of the Gulf countries coming together and trying to create their own security architecture. So therefore, whatever rapprochement that was happening between Iran, Saudi Arabia, and the other countries in the region is at risk. And that's very likely to happen. We don't know who's going to come to power in Iran eventually, whether there'll be a regime change. That is the agenda of the United States. But how to achieve that would be a very major problem. Perhaps they are trying to impose the Libya model even in Iran. And if that happens, we see what's happening in Libya. You are looking at another disaster waiting to happen.
Right. Ambassador, also when we talk about allies, we have Russia and China who have also condemned. But when we look at the allies, for example, China, they have also been trading with Iran. And how do you analyze the reactions from China and Russia going forward? As of now, of course, we've just seen condemnation from them. But then when we talk about trade and everything that's going to be impacted and there's going to be a global disruption, how then would you see the power change and the whole scenario, if at all it will change?
Well, I think that one of the major objectives of President Trump in Iran was not necessarily the regime change alone. It was also to try and secure the oil supplies against China. That has been one of the things. And if that happens, then China will obviously try to, when its economic interests are hurt, it'll try to do something. But so far, the silence of both China and Russia, or the way they have gone about doing it, is also pretty stunning. And that is, I think, they must be working on something. I mean, talking in the United Nations Security Council, where all five of them have these veto powers and nothing is going to come out of it, it makes no sense. Frankly, what is required is that Russia and China and Iran, they also had a security pact. So we have not seen much happening, although we heard that a lot of equipment has come in and all that. But the Iran's air defenses are basically decimated completely. Of course, they have other strengths like their missiles and drones, which they are using with successfully rather everywhere else, despite a cordon off by the Iron Dome or others. They have been able to penetrate them. And soon we will see the interceptors like the 12-day war being decimated. And that will create another major problem if the Iranians are able to sustain this war for quite some time.
And how do you assess for example, they have been attacking everywhere in West Asia, considering the fact that, they've also depleted some part of the missiles when the 12-day war happened last year. How long do you assess that this, of course, according to Trump, he says 4 to 5 weeks, but can Iran actually sustain? What is your analysis of that?
Well, I think it will be difficult for Iran to sustain because they are estimated to have about 2,500 to 3,000 missiles. They might be using the hypersonic missiles, and right now they are doing some cruise or other missiles. And if they start using all those, and today, as you know, that they've developed a new strategy whereby each commander has been made in charge, irrespective of the decapitation. So they are taking their own call and consistently fighting, according to them, their enemies. But at the same time, what they have done in the Middle East, or hitting targets in Saudi Arabia, UAE, Qatar, and Oman and other places, I think that will alienate them further from in the region. I mean, that is something should be worrying for the Iran going forward. But at the moment, it looks like that Iran is fighting its last battle.
Right. And how do you assess the Iranian regime? Of course, according to, well, Trump also has asked the Iranian people to revolt against and take power. But when you take a look at the Iranian regime and the hierarchy that takes place, of course, there were, warnings about Khamenei being eliminated, even the 12-day war last year. With him gone, how do you look at the Iranian regime and its establishment, and do you think it can sustain, even after 47 years there? How long can the Iranian regime sustain, and is there any way that Iranian people can actually revolt as Trump expects to happen?
Well, I think that most of the times these kind of things happen with two ways, and I have seen it in Libya happening. One is that the people are frustrated with the regime, a large number of people. But in Iran, not unfortunately, but the reality is that about half of the population have the ideological leanings and alignments with the regime, essentially. And about another half, which is mostly young people, professionals and others who want to integrate in the global economy, are the ones who might be looking for a change. But Iran is also a civilization nation. Most of the people are very highly educated. So it is possible that they might be looking at the countries like Iraq, Iraq, Libya, Syria, Lebanon, and all those countries. Now they must be thinking that through the external intervention, are they looking at their country to be like that? Or how it's going to be? Even if there is a regime change, and there could be a civil war as well. I mean, you never know if there is too much of a pressure from one side or the other. So we'll know going forward. But at the moment, I think the regime has been in place. But if the Americans are somehow able to completely take out the regime, as they say, they have taken out 48 of their top leaders, whether military or the political leaders, including Khamenei, I think that then something can be possible, but it will not be easily sustainable. We have seen what happened when the first time Shah came in, when the democracy was undermined by the Western powers. The same kind of a situation they are looking at today.
And talking of power, Trump has, he said that he has claimed that he has 3 names that he has to lead Iran. In that case, of course, he has named them, and of course he said that let's get the job done first. But if at all, there is some name that Trump has now backed. What kind of power dynamics will we see, if at all we see Trump, having choosing that one person who will now lead Iran, as he claims?
As you know, currently they have a temporary leadership council that has been made, which means the president, Pezeshkian, is there. There is the head of the Supreme Court judiciary, and then you have the head of the council, Guardian Council, Al-Arafi. Now, he is only Ayatollah. So according to the current system, it has to be an Ayatollah who will lead the nation, or at least the religious part of it. And IRGC, which is the Revolutionary Guard leadership, that also has a tremendous say in all this. And they will be very, very important in deciding who's going to be their boss at the end of the day. Now, Ayatollah apparently had left 4 names which have come out to the public, including one of his sons, then Mustafa. We don't know really who's going to make out, but the fact remains is we'll have to wait and watch as to how many are further eliminated by the Israeli intelligence services or the American CIA and Mossad combined, and who remains there. So it will depend on that. Essentially, at the moment, you can't say. But President Trump, I don't know whom he is saying that he has in mind. But at the same time, there is a former Shah's son is also in the reckoning. Even though personally President Trump didn't seem to like him. But that could be one of the options that they are looking at. And here, if Arafi survives, that he has a better chance.
Right. Of course, we'll have to wait and see who that name comes to be, if at all.
Yes.
But of course, it's a war that is not just West Asia that has been impacted. It's the whole global scenario that is being impacted. But thank you so much, Ambassador, for joining us on the broadcast and giving your perspective. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you.